We're here today to celebrate Black history and especially the heroes of the past. And I want to speak right now to the youngest kids, our elementary, middle school, and high schools. When you hear these people present their stories today, remember that on their backs is what made us be able to do what we are doing today. It just didn't come up, it just didn't happen. There was some bloodshed, there was some marching, there was some loss of lives, so that we can be able to stay where we want to stay, eat where we want to eat, fly where we want to fly, do whatever we want to do, is because of the heroes of the past that gave us this passage. Okay, and I just want to say that I looked up the color black. You know, a lot of times we are referred to as that black man, that black woman, that. But let me tell you about black. It says, black is the color producing or reflecting comparative little light and having no comparatively hue. Now, we know that's not true because we just saw that up there now, the light from these young people. We have been here before the Egyptians, the pilgrims came. Blackness was here before then. When they came on the Mayflower, we were here before the first cannons were fired, the Revolutionary War. We were here. Some of us were slaves, and some of us were free. But we were here, and still, as free people, we were unable to understand what freedom means. We heard the Revolutionary War did the issues. It states that the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Then among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We have trouble with that today, equality and the pursuit of happiness. Most of our names have been forgotten by now, for many of us were slaves. We were listed only as property, not people. Animals were treated better than we. We could not write our own names because we didn't know how to write. And now it seems time has forgotten our names. Yet we have a great history in this country. Ours is the heroic history of survival. Our history travels the length of a whip and the vastness of a dream. It spans oceans and centuries. It is the history of the human spirit, a quest for freedom. It is the history of our souls. Okay.
We began in Africa, though most of us don't know where our ancestors were when they were kidnapped and brought across the ocean as slaves. We know the slave ships were overcrowded and our people were abused. The sight was terrible. One man who worked as a slave ship captain knew the sight well. He grew to hate the slave business and wrote a song that we still sing today. His name was John Newton, and the song is Amazing Grace. He wrote this song one stormy night when the oceans seemed to swallow him and the whole ship with hundreds of slaves whole. The names of the slaves on Mr. Newton's ship was not known, but we know they were African. They received new names once they arrived at their destination. Their own children did not have African names. They were raised speaking English. They had names like Frederick, or Harriet, Nathaniel. Perhaps you have heard of Nathaniel Nat Turner, who led his fellow slaves in a dangerous and bloody rebellion. It was in August of 1831 that Mr. Turner led a rebellion in Virginia that left dozens of people dead, including small children. 185 years ago, in the early hours of August 22nd, Turner and some of his fellow slaves entered Turner's master's home. They decided before entering that Nat must spill the first blood to start the rebellion. Turner was soon captured and the uprising was suppressed. But in the weeks immediately afterward, Americans were demanded to know something that may seem obvious. Why had it been done? Nearly 2 centuries later, that legacy of a question is still evolving.
In November of 1831, shortly before his execution, I gave a jailhouse confession to my attorney, Thomas Gray. To answer the question, the story begins. During my childhood, when I had an experience that seemed to my family to indicate the indication of the power of prophecy. Growing up, believing that I was destined for great things, I eventually reached a turning point. As I recall, I was born to the property of Benjamin Turner. I had a vision, and I saw a white spirit and a black spirit engaged in battle. As I was praying one night at my plow, the Spirit spoke to me, saying, "Seek ye the kingdom of heaven, and all these things shall be added unto you." Question: what you mean by the Spirit? Answer: the Spirit that spoke to me to the prophets in former days. And I was greatly astonished and followed, and from 2 years, for 2 years prayed continuously, whenever my duty would permit. And then, again, I had the same revelation, which fully confirms to me in the impression that I was ordained for some great purpose in the hands of the Almighty. Several years rolled around in which many events occurred to strengthen me in this, my belief. At the time, I was reverted in my mind to the remarks made to me in my childhood by those by whom I had been taught to pray, both white and black, and in whom I had the greatest confidence that I had too much sense to be raised, and if I was, I would never be of any use to anyone as a slave. Now finally I have arrived to man's estate and was a slave. And these revelations began being made known to me. I began to direct my attention to this great object, to fulfill its purpose, for which by this time I felt assured I was intended The sun was darkened. The thunder rolled in the heavens. Blood flowed in the streams. And I heard a voice said, "Such is your luck. So such you are called to see. And let it come, rough or smooth. You must bear it. Nat Turner is my name."
Praise the Lord, everybody. Hallelujah. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Sweet low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? Coming for to carry me home. A band of angels coming after me, coming for to carry me home. Sweet Lord, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. If you get there before I do, coming for to carry me home, tell all my friends I'm coming for to carry me home. Why don't you come down, Cherry? Won't you let me ride? Come down, Cherry, won't you let me ride? Oh, rock me, Lord, come and lead me. I got hope on the other side. Why don't you swing down, Cherry, stop and let me ride? Oh, swing down, Cherry, stop and let me ride. Oh, rock me, Lord, rock me, Lord. I got hope on the other side. Why don't you swing down, Cherry, up and let me ride? Oh, swing down, Cherry, stop and let me ride. Oh, rock me, Lord, come and lead me. I got hope on the other side. Hallelujah. Nat Turner and other slaves were executed after this rebellion. But many people, white and black, were listening anew to the message of slaves and former slaves. Most of the people wanted to abolish slavery, to get rid of it. They were called abolitionists. One of the most important men of our race was Frederick Douglass. Like Nat Turner, he was born a slave, but he ran away from his master and became a great speaker for the abolitionists. Standing before a large audience like this one today, he would tell about his childhood and about the evils of slavery.
My mother's visits to me were few, brief, and mostly made in the night. Yet I shall never forget her expression when I told her I had had no food to eat and that the mistress had tried to starve the life out of me. There was pity in her glance at me. She gave me a large ginger cake. That night I learned that I was not only a child, but somebody's child. The sweet ginger cake my mother gave to me was in the shape of a heart. On my mother's knees, I was a king upon his throne. But my triumph was short. I dropped off to sleep to wake in the morning only to find my mother gone. I do not remember to have seen her after this. I learned, after my mother's death, that she could read. That a field hand should learn to read in any slave state was remarkable. But the achievement of my mother, considering the place, was extraordinary. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one. And it may be both moral and physical. But it may be a struggle nevertheless. Power concedes nothing without a demand, and it never did and it never will. For it is light that is needed, but fire. It is not the ginger shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The propriety of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed, and its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed, as well as denounced. One man, one God, make a majority.
Times I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child alone, way from home. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child alone, way from home.
Still, the dark night of slavery fell upon me. I deteriorated until I felt a resurrection from the dark tomb of slavery to the heaven of freedom. I was not afraid to die. Bruises I did get, but this made me a free man. I am Frederick Douglass.
Mr. Douglass sometimes took off his shirt during his speechless and showed the deep whips on his back. Sometimes that caused the women in the audience to faint. And sometimes another former slave, a woman, would join him in speaking human rights. Sojourner Truth is her name. Her exact birthday is unknown, as it was the case with most newborn children. Around the age of 9, she was sold to her slave master, John Neely, for $100 and a couple of sheep. John Neely was a very violent person who physically abused Sojourner for all the time she was spent in his house. At 13 years old, Sojourner was sold to 2 other slave owners, finally coming to the estate of John Dumont, located in Ulster County, New York. When Sojourner was 18 years of age, she met another slave named Robert that worked on a farm close to her. However, she did not have permission to marry him because he wasn't a slave on Mr. Dumont's farm. With Thomas Joyner, she gave birth to 5 children: Diana, Elizabeth, Sophia, Peter, and James.
Ain't I a woman? I have as much muscle as any man and can do as much work as any man. I have plowed, reaped, husked, chopped, and mowed. Can any man do more than that? I tell you, the meanest child of glory outshines the brightest sun. I am Sojourner Truth, an African-American female born into a slave family. My born name is Isabella Bonfrey. I am an American activist for women's rights, an abolitionist, and an evangelist. I lived from 1797 to 1883, 86 long, hard, but fruitful years. And then during my lifetime, I raised my voice on many important social topics concerning race and gender. In the state of New York in 1799, the talks of abolition of slavery started, but it didn't happen until July 4, 1827. But no, I couldn't wait that long. I escaped that old Dumont's farm in 1826, taking only my precious newborn daughter, Sophia, with me. But shortly after my escape, I learned my 5-year-old son had illegally been sold to a slave owner in Alabama. I was really mad about that, so I decided to do something about it. I took them to court, where I won that case, and eventually my son returned back to Alabama. This was the first case a black woman, an ex-slave, went to court and won against a white man, y'all, and a slave owner. I am Sojourner Truth.
Every time I think of the words Underground Railroad, another great woman of color comes to mind, Harriet Tubman. If you close your eyes and imagine what an Underground Railroad was like, one would think of it having a conductor, railroad car assistants, iron rails, smokestacks, and a whistle. But Harriet's railroad was different all around. It was not a real railroad with tracks and trains. It consisted of mostly safe houses where runaway slaves could stay on their way to freedom. Some call Harriet Tubman Moses. Like Moses of old, she led slaves to the promised land. Let's wait a minute. Let's let Harriet tell her story.
This little old black woman from the Eastern Shore defied slavery, not by escaping slavery, but by leading dozens of others to freedom through the Underground Railroad. At 2 years old, I saw my parents, my sisters, Linda and Soph, being dragged from the action site, officially sold, wailing and crying before they disappeared hundreds of miles south. A forced birth of bondage. I knew that a soul slave was a slave taken from my family. I never saw them again after that day. Out of the 70 enslaved people I took on the Underground Railroad and the hundreds more I guided to freedom, I couldn't find my sister. A man named Edward Borders, the slave owner who sold my sisters, planned to sell my brother to a buyer from Georgia. But my mother, Harriet Ritt Ross, wasn't going to stand for that. She told Borders the first man that came into her house, she would split his head wide open. When she got the chance, she hid my brother in the woods. About a month, the buyer went back down south. I was only 7 years old when I was sent away to take care of a white baby. One morning I stood by the table waiting till I was to take it. Just by me was a bowl of lumps of white sugar. I stood by that table waiting. I never had anything good. And that sugar sure did look good. So as my missus was standing there, I stuck my hand over in the bowl to get some of that sugar. And just at that time, my missus came back. And she turned to me, and the next minute, she had the rawhide out. I just flew, and she didn't catch me. I run, and I run, and I run, and I run. I was clear tuckered out. I came to a pig pen. I stayed from Friday to Tuesday, fighting with those little pigs for the potato peelings and other scraps. By Tuesday, I was starved. I knowed I had to go back to my missus. I hadn't got nowhere else to go. But years later, I did have some place to go, Freedom Land. And I took many others with me. You see, that was one of two things I had a right to, liberty or death. If I could not have one, I would have the other. For no man should take me alive. The care of my Underground Railroad is the hiding places called stations. The cargo escaped slaves. Children come in. We travel by foot mostly. Sometimes we were lucky enough to have a wagon. So many people, ordinary, black, white, and some underclassmen helped the slaves escape to freedom. I didn't make many speeches, but I made over 19 trips to help slaves escape to their freedom. I took them from one hiding place to another, using the ways I knew where freedom was but return time and again to the slave world to rescue others. This is what we call the Underground Railroad. But I run away to where freedom was, but I returned time and time to the slave world to rescue other slaves. I lost the battle as a freedom fighter, March 10th, 1913, at the age of 93 with pneumonia. I am Harriet Tubman. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. No, no more weeping, no more weeping, no more weeping over me. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free.
When the prisoners came, they brought 3 colored servants with them from Utah: Hawk Lay, Oscar Cosby, and Green Flake. Green Flake was probably driving Brigham Young's wagon. Green Flake and others were burdened with constructing a trail that will lead over 70,000 people across the western frontier. That would be the largest pioneer migration in American history. As a teenage slave, Green drove the first wagon into Utah territory and would go on to be one of the most respected Western heroes of his time. Years later, at a Pioneer Recognition Day, Green was honored. There was a girl that asked him a question. Mr. Flake, what was it like to be a slave?
I want to answer it. Being a slave is all right if you just want to be a slave, that is. But many of us colored folks want a better life if we could find one. I was raised as a slave and had a master to tell me what to do. He gave me a place to sleep, fed and clothed me, worked me, and told me what to do every day. They told me when to go to sleep, told me when to wake up and get up, told me when to go to work, told me when to eat, told me when to toilet, told me when to talk, and told me when to shut up. Sounds a lot like prison, doesn't it? That's just what it was. Sometimes I got whipped, and my master would give me a big kick in the pants if I slept off, made a mistake, or if I was lazy. Slavery been around for a long time. And the colored folks got sold like they were a horse, cow, dogs, or some other animal. We became owners, we became the owner's property. And we worked long and hard for the master. Most slaves didn't want to be enslaved and be in bondage to another, because you can't have even your own thoughts and dreams. You can't plan nothing. All decisions get made by someone else. I was born into slavery on January 6, 1828, on the Jordan Flake Plantation in Anson County, North Carolina. I was given to my owner's son, James Madison Flake, by his father, Jordan Flake, in 1838 as a wedding gift. Isn't that something? I took the last name of my master, and I am Mr. Greenflake.
Can't you see that the need for freedom was deep in all the slaves, and they sang about it often? Freedom came out, but not easy. It came with blood. It cost this nation a civil war to free its slaves. Many coloreds fought in that war, too. It often was, after it was over, we were emancipated, but emancipation brought with it new challenges. Most who had been slaves still couldn't read or write. We didn't have good schools, and we sure didn't have any money. Some still farmed the ground they had farmed as slaves. However, after emancipation, they could sell the crops they raised. Often moved elsewhere in search of a better life. Some found it, and some found only sorrow and trouble.
Sometimes I'm up, sometimes I'm down. Oh, yes, Lord. Sometimes I'm almost to the ground. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows but my Jesus. Nobody knows the
education. We needed a vision of what we could be, not just the memory of what we had been. There were many who built schools to educate the freed slaves and their children. One of the great ones was Booker T. Washington. He founded Tuskegee Institute and laid the foundation for others that will build on. Good people are still working and building to ensure opportunities for education will be equal for white and blacks alike, and that all races will have equal say in the government.
Before I get started, I'm going to go ahead and put this disclaimer out there. I will not be singing a song. They call me Booker T. Washington, and I want y'all to take note of this. The T stands for Taliaferro, which means iron cutter in Italian. The Taliaferros were one of the early prominent families in Virginia. I was born April 5th, 1856 in Franklin County, Virginia, in a slave hut. After emancipation, which is the Emancipation Proclamation document that legally freed the slaves, I moved with my family to Malden, West Virginia. I'm an educator, a reformer, the first president and principal developer of Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute, which is now Tuskegee University. It was said that I was the most influential spokesman for Black Americans from 1895 to 1915. Extreme poverty ruled out a regular schooling for me. At age 9, I began work in the salt mines and then later in the coal mines. Determined to get an education, in 1872, I enrolled in Hampton Normal and Agricultural Institute, a historically African American university, better known as Hampton University today. I worked there as a janitor to help pay my expenses. I graduated in 1875 and returned to Malden. For 2 years, I taught children in the daytime and adults at night. Following studies at Wayland Seminary, I joined the staff of Hampton University. In 1881, I was selected to head the newly established School for African Americans at Tuskegee, an institution with 2 small converted buildings, no equipment, and very little money. I want y'all to stick a note in that. Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute became a monument to my life's work, which ended in November 14, 1915, in Tuskegee, Alabama. At my death, there were more than 100 well-equipped buildings. We went from 2 to 100. 1,500 students and a faculty of nearly 200. 38 trades and professions, and an endowment of approximately $2 million. Think about that. In 1915, $2 million. Today's money, that's approximately $51 million. During my lifetime, I didn't believe that any state should make a law that permits an ignorant and poverty-stricken white man the right to vote and prevent a black man in the same situation from voting. I was famous in my day and respected. But full freedom still was a long way off for us. So there came a time when it was necessary to stand up for civil rights. I am Booker T. Washington, and ladies and gentlemen, I present to you a very brave lady who refused to stand up, Miss Rosa Parks.
I was born Rosa Louise McCauley, February the 4th, 1913, to James and Leona McCauley in Tuskegee, Alabama. After my parents separated, my mother moved us to Pine Level, Alabama, where we lived on Edwards Farm. During my early years, I encountered much racial discrimination. One experience that I remember was when my grandfather, Sylvester Edwards, stood in front of our house with a shotgun while the Ku Klux Klan marched down the street. On December the 5th, 1955, this was one of the most memorable and inspiring days of my life. I was arrested for refusing a bus driver's instruction to give up my seat to a white passenger. My refusal wasn't because I was physically tired. It wasn't because I was physically tired, but because I was tired of giving in. After a long day's work as a seamstress in a Montgomery department store, I boarded the Cleveland Avenue bus for home. I took a seat in the first of several rows designated for colored passengers. The Montgomery City Code required all public transportation to be segregated. They were required to provide separate but equal accommodations for white and black passengers by assigning seats. This was accomplished with a line in the middle of the bus, separating white passengers in the front and African American passengers in the back. We would board the bus in the front to pay our fare, then get off and reboard the bus at the back door. As the bus was continuing its route, it began to fill with white passengers. Eventually, the bus was full, and the driver noticed that several white passengers were standing in the aisle. He stopped and moved the sign separating the two sections back one row, asking four black passengers to get up and give up their seat. Three of the black passengers on the bus complied with the driver, but I refused, and I remained seated. The bus driver demanded, "Why don't you just get up?" And I replied, "I don't think I should have to." The driver called the police, and I was arrested. History records this day as the beginning of the modern civil rights movement. Martin Luther King said of me and others, when the history books are written in the future, someone will have to say, there lived a race of people, a black people, fleecy locks and black complexion, a people who had the moral courage to stand up for their rights, and thereby they injected a new meaning into the veins of history and of civilization. In 1998, the hip-hop group Outkast released a song. It was called Rosa Parks, featuring the chorus, hush that fuss, everybody move to the back of the bus. I am Rosa Parks.
So I grew up in the time in Memphis, Tennessee, when Martin Luther King was shot and killed. And it was because he was there for the Memphis sanitation strike. And, you know, I could just remember my mother's face when it was announced that he was killed. The tears just seemed like they just streamed down her face. The hurt, the anguish, the pain. And we all knew that a change was going to have to come. So I thank God for allowing me just to see that time. I was born by the river in a little tent, whoa, and just like the river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long, long, long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. It's been too hard living, and I'm afraid to die, 'cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long, long, long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. When I go to the movie and I go downtown, somebody keeps telling me, don't hang around. It's been a long, long, long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes it will. Then I go to my brother and I say, brother, can you help me please? But he keeps knocking me back down on my knees. Whoa, whoa. There's been times when I thought it wasn't gonna last too long, but now I think I'm gonna carry on. It's been a long, long, long time coming, but I know a change gonna come. Oh, yes it will.
Woo! Johnny, wasn't that one of our songs when we got married in 1982? I just thought I'd throw that out there. Oh my goodness. Good job, Mr. Dawes. Thank you so much for agreeing to do that for us. There were a few African American foot soldiers that helped pave the way to freedom, but today the number have increased. African Americans, poets, musicians, artists, doctors, politicians, lawyers, professors, and etc. We call ourselves African Americans because we cherish our heritage in its completeness, Africa and America. Put together, African Americans. We didn't have to be born in Africa to be an African American. We know that our ancestors transitioned here, so that is a part of our ethnicity. We are here, and we still are building lives and legacy. It is not our belief, perhaps no one help us to understand our worth and our dreams, quite like the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., born January the 15th, 1929. He was an American Baptist minister and an activist who became the most visible spokesperson and leader in the civil rights movement from 1955 until his assassination, April the 4th. I believe I'll just let Mr. King, Reverend King, tell us about his story.
Thank you, Mr. Dawes. I am Martin Luther King, and I am in Birmingham for a very important reason. It's because injustice is here. You have law enforcement officials with hose flooding people of color with a stream of water forceful enough to knock a person down, to break a leg, arm, or even kill someone. You have the use of dogs and you have the use of bombs. And it is difficult to breathe because of the air of injustice burns your nose. While I was in jail in Birmingham, I wrote about injustice, the cruelty, and the racism that fills God's air. Now, this is a copy of the original letter that I wrote, and I addressed it to the local clergyman concerning the issues at hand. Okay, I know that I am compelled to carry the gospel of freedom beyond my hometown in Atlanta. I could not just sit idly by as if everything was going well in Birmingham. It had been nearly a century after the Confederacy guns fell silent. The racial legacy of slavery and Reconstruction continued to reverberate loudly throughout Alabama since 1965. Even with the passage of the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964 months earlier, had done very little in some parts of the state to ensure that African Americans the right to vote. In Dallas County, Selma, they had a tight Jim Crow grip on African America. African America made up more than half of the population, but yet only 2% of the registered voters. The rise in racial tension finally boiled over in the bloodshed in the town of Marion, Alabama, February 18, 1965. State troopers clubbed protesters and fatally shot Jimmy Lee Jackson, 26-year-old, an American demonstrator who was simply trying to protect his mother, who was being struck by the police. The outrage of Bloody Sunday really still obstruct my memory. The news of this horrific event swept the nation, the country like wildfire. You had sympathizers staging sit-ins. There were traffic blockades, and demonstrators staged in harmony with voting right marches. And some sympathizers even traveled to Selma, where 2 days later I attempted another march, but to the fear of the demonstrators, they turned back when they saw the state troopers had once again blocked the highway at the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Finally, a federal court order permitting the protest of marchers allowed them to leave Selma March 21st under the protection of the National Guard. 4 days later, we reached Montgomery with the crowd growing up to 25,000 by the time we reached the steps of the Capitol in downtown Montgomery. Ladies and gentlemen, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. The time is always right to do what is right. You know what African American need from the white man is to free him from his fears. And the white man needs the Negro to free him from his guilt. Will that ever happen in my lifetime? But I say to you today, my friends, we must continue to hold on to the things that made us great. And you know, that's our spiritual genius. I repeat, that's our spiritual genius. Though we face difficulties of today and tomorrow, and we have our backs against the wall, but guess what? We have not become bitter. I say again, we've had our backs against the wall, but we have not become bitter, and we still have hope. You know, there's something great in people who can do this. Henceforth, we cannot be satisfied with a piece of freedom. Freedom is much like life. It cannot be had in installment. And we know from painful experience, freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressors. It must be demanded by the oppressed. But still, in spite of all, I have a dream. I have a dream that someday my 4 little girls will be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. It's a dream that is deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. And that is, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And I want to leave this with you that we must learn to live together as brethren, or we will perish as fools. I have a dream today. I'm Martin Luther King, Jr.
I have a dream today too. A dream that each of us here today will continue to have a consistent relationship with God. If you don't have one, I encourage you to do so. I have a dream that we will continue to live by faith, continue to be steadfast and unmovable, and an obligation to yourself to know that your dreams can and will come true. It all depends on you. So dream big and lift your voice and sing. Lift every voice and sing. Let us sing.